Hello and welcome to Devil's Advocate. With just 8 days to go for the Games, how does the Commonwealth Games Federation assess India's preparedness? That's the key issue I should raise today in an exclusive interview with the President of the Federation, Mike Fennell. Mr. Fennell, let's start with the Games Village. You've been there on Friday, you're going to go there again on Saturday. Now, the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi has said that as of Wednesday evening, 80% of the work is complete. But this morning at your press conference, you said quite extensive work is left to be done. How substantive is the work that remains?
Well, a lot of detailed work is yet to be done. And I would hesitate to put a percentage on this, because how do you arrive at a percentage of the amount of work? All this detailed work, the completing of the cleaning up, but there's water in the basements in some of the buildings. Some of the elevators are not working properly. Some of the safety systems are not yet fully in place. So there's quite a lot of work to be done, detailed work, which has to be done very carefully and methodically until it's completed. And I should say that the work that is being done very quickly and very well.
It's being done very quickly and very well, but as you say, there is an awful lot that still needs to be done.
Yeah.
And some of it actually has to do with structural things like lifts, not just cleaning.
Well, I wouldn't call the lifts a structural lift, but because of the water and some of the repair work that has to be done, they have not been able to complete all the work on the lifts, the elevators. So these are things that still have to be done.
What about the 18 towers in the Games Village for residential purposes, which were built later and which Mr. Kalmadi said were a little shambolic when he first received them? What condition are they in at the moment?
Some of them are not in very good condition. But remember this, all 34 buildings will provide more capacity than we really need. So they have some spare space. So the possibility is that if they had to close down or partial or close down of some of the blocks, this would not be a problem because there's a lot of capacity. But those buildings, the second 16 blocks, because there are 34 in total, certainly some of them were not well done.
So some of them were not well done, and some of them may not even be ready and may never be used.
No, they're all going to be ready. But there may be one or two apartments that we will discount.
Have you set a date by when the organizing committee must ensure that the Games Village is ready to be occupied, so that athletes like the British who've chosen to stay in hotels to begin with can actually move in? Do you have a target date?
Well, there's not a cut-off date for the whole thing. That date has passed. What we're doing is a progressive finalization, and as they're completed, people can move in.
When those pictures, and they were pretty horrific pictures, first appeared on television and the net, how horrified were you by the state of hygiene and the state of filth in the Games Village?
I was horrified that it was left like that. Remember that I visited the village on the 18th and 19th of August, which was my last visit here. And I said at that time that the cleaning up needed to be done. I was horrified that it was still left in that condition over that period of time.
So you felt that your warnings had been ignored, or at least not heeded properly?
Not heeded properly at all. And there's no question that I gave warnings. I think you may recall that up to a year ago I was giving warnings.
Now, when your letter to the Cabinet Secretary expressing your sense of dismay at the lack of hygiene was made public, the Secretary General of the Organizing Committee, Lalit Bhanot, publicly said that there was a difference in perception in hygiene standards between India and some of the Commonwealth countries. How do you respond to that comment?
Well, that's a totally unacceptable statement. And I don't think hygiene has any nationality. Good hygiene is the same all over the world. So I wouldn't debate that at all. It's totally unacceptable.
Did you take this comment up with Mr. Bhanot or with any Indian authority?
No, I don't. I've dealt with Mr. Kalmadi on that.
You dealt with Mr. Kalmadi?
Yes.
Did you point out that this was unacceptable?
Yes, absolutely.
And what response did you get from Mr. Kalmadi?
Mr. Kalmadi agrees, and certainly I'll leave that to him.
Now, a second issue connected with the Games Village is the threat of dengue. It's no secret that the Games Village has been built on the flood plains of the Yamuna River, and at the moment floodwaters are virtually lapping at the walls. Are you worried that athletes could get dengue?
Dengue is all over the world. It's not an Indian phenomenon. In fact, I come from the part of the world where we are also on dengue alert. The necessary preventative actions are taken, that is making sure that the water stagnation is treated, that the fogging of the premises is done on a regular basis, and we have already warned, and I sent out a communique again on the 19th of August, where I advised people to bring with them whatever repellents they're accustomed to use, so that they can take the necessary
But all the
precautions.
television and newspaper reports suggest that you have large quantities of stagnant water just outside the games village.
But that water is being treated. I saw them treating it myself yesterday.
So you're reasonably reassured that everything that needs to be done is being done?
Is being done. But they need to get rid of the stagnant water.
They need to get rid of it?
Yes. Treating it is one thing, and that's controlling it. But they still need to get rid of the stagnant water.
Have you communicated this to
Yes,
them?
oh yes.
Are they acting with the alacrity you want to see?
Yes, they're acting on it, but the removal of the water from some of the basements is taking longer than they had promised.
And is that dismaying you?
No, I think one of the problems is that they've made ambitious promises without knowing how long it will take. And again, this is what has disappointed people, because when they say this will be done in 24 hours, they haven't arrived at 24 hours by any proper means, and it's not unreasonable for some of these things to take longer, but they did make a promise.
Let's come to the second big issue, which is safety. After the collapse of a foot-over bridge just outside the main stadium, Jawaharlal Nehru Stadium, and after parts of the false ceiling at the weightlifting stadium came down, how confident are you that you're not going to witness more such mishaps?
What should be quite clear, that footbridge was still under construction, right? It was not completed, and therefore it is difficult to judge precisely what happened. I'm not an engineer, and therefore I cannot tell you what went wrong.
What about the ceiling which was completed and
The
which came
ceiling was
tumbling down?
completed, and again, I don't have sufficient details to comment on that, but with the massive amount of construction that has gone on here, it's not strange that you would have had some remedial work to do in some of the buildings.
That's a very understanding approach you take. Let me point out to you that the Indian Central Vigilance Commission in July revealed that some of the test reports had been fabricated, that in some of the stadiums substandard cement or concrete had been used, and that electrical installations in 14 out of 17 venues at that time had not been tested. How seriously does the Federation take such reports?
Very serious, because we have asked for usage certificates and certificates of the construction and the integrity of the engineering, etc. And yes, we read those reports. Yes, we have been through it with the authorities and have received the necessary assurances that they've gone through all of this and verified and corrected whatever needs to be.
Did you ask for third-party independent checks on structural safety or on electrical safety?
Well, a lot of these checks are third party. They're not by the people who built them. They're coming from the independent authorities in India, by the authorities. We cannot ask for more than that.
There is a rumor, and I emphasize that it's just a rumor, that some of the structural safety certificates for the main stadium, the Jawaharlal Nehru Stadium, have not as yet been made available to the Commonwealth Games Federation. And again, the rumor says that you've been approached to perhaps waive some of them. Is there any truth in that?
Well, the second thing, we have not been approached to waive it. That's not true at all.
What about the first? Have you got all the safety structural certificates for the Jawaharlal Nehru Stadium, or is there something wanting or lacking?
No, we've got all the certificates for the stadium, but remember, if you take the village, there are 34 blocks, and there is a general approval for the whole development. We're asking block by block to look at the engineering and the construction, and to have that passed, and we've got the various authorities to give us those assurances with the necessary
So you
certificates.
want block by block certificates
Yes.
for the residential
Yes.
block?
And later on today, we're going to have copies in our files, which we will have as our assurance.
And that will be given to you
Yes,
later on today?
yes.
You're
That
confident?
also includes the other certificates for fire and safety, because there's a concern about the fire hoses, the fire drills, the fire alarm systems, the evacuation procedures and all of that.
So,
and we're getting that this
so
afternoon.
just to sum up this part, certain block by block certificates for towers in the Games Village, as well as fire safety
Yes.
certificates and alarm, have still to come,
Yep.
but you're hopeful they will come this afternoon.
Yes, and we're doing this. This is not a normal procedure in any games, because we have never done this before, but because of the concern for the safety, we feel that we have the responsibility on behalf of all the athletes and officials who will be coming here. to ensure that we can validate those.
So you've had to go to extraordinary lengths in the case of India.
Yeah, correct.
Mr. Fennell, let's take a break at that point, but this is by no means the end of the interview. We have a lot more to cover. See you in a moment's time. Welcome back to Devil's Advocate and an exclusive interview with the President of the Commonwealth Games Federation, Mike Fennell. Let's then come to the third issue, which is security. After the shooting incident on Sunday at Jama Masjid, and after an Australian television channel exposed in a sting operation what they claimed was security lapses in India, and I should add that the Delhi police consider that to be a bogus story, how confident are you and the Games Federation of the security preparedness of Delhi?
Well, there's no question that the security planning has been extremely good, very sound. They have not only done it within India here, but they have invited people from outside to review this. We from the Federation have gone to the trouble of employing independent consultants who do this all over the world, and they have made periodic visits on security to check the systems, the planning, and the implementation of that planning. So certainly we are satisfied that from the point of view of the country, the Indian government has taken very good measures about the security of India as a country, not just for the Games. Secondly, the city of Delhi and the security authorities in Delhi, and then the Games security arrangements, we feel all that can be done has been put in place. The next point is, how is it working? And since yesterday we've had some discussions with the chief of the police commissioner and others about some details of how it can work better, because funny thing is that the security has been so good it has been restricting the movement of people, and this is something that we have to get a balance.
What about the fact that the lockdown at the venues has only happened on Friday, just 9 days before? The police had made it clear that they would like to have happened 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks earlier. Is that an issue of concern?
Yeah, we all would have liked that to be done long before. But because of the cleaning and the importance of cleaning the village, it could not be done, because you can't be cleaning and have a lockdown.
So this is a delay you have to live with?
We have to live with that delay. It's now being taken care of.
But all the necessary police arrangements that have to be made after lockdown, you're confident will happen?
We're very confident about that.
So on security, you actually have words of praise for the Indian government, even though elsewhere you have serious
Certainly
concern.
they've done, but some of the planning is not working as we intended, and that's being worked out. And this is not unique. In the planning of any major event, you have little things. For instance, they're having problems with the transport and the security on the transport, and there are issues that are being dealt with. What is important, not only expected, but is how you deal with it, and the urgency with which you correct them when they do happen.
Is the correct approach and urgency being applied?
No, it is.
Now it is. So earlier it wasn't.
No, we were not satisfied earlier, but now that people understand and they're waking up to the call, they are dealing with it with a reasonable amount of urgency.
People have been slow to understand and slow to wake up. That's a yes?
Yes.
What then would you say, summing up, is your feelings about India's overall preparedness for this Games?
It has been a difficult journey, and a journey which we ourselves are learning to deal with a country and its culture and its management systems and management styles. And I'm hoping that India will also see it as a learning experience too, to understand the international community a little better, and not just the Indian community. India is a successful country. It will internationally be stacked up amongst the superpowers. But in terms of hosting an international event, I think this has been and ought to be a big learning experience for India.
How would you assess the manner in which the organizing committee has handled the Games?
I think there were a lot of weaknesses. There was no shortage of commitment. There's no shortage of their desire to do the best, but sometimes they didn't quite understand the complexity of the requirements, and they were a little reluctant to accept outside views as to how things should be done.
Because of pride and prestige?
I wouldn't like to put an answer to that one. This is something that will come in our review.
How do you assess Suresh KALMADI'S leadership and his chairmanship of the organizing committee?
Again, you know, there's no question about that. Mr. KALMADI is a very charismatic leader. He ran a very successful bid to win the right to host the games.
But then thereafter?
Thereafter, it requires a different approach. And certainly, this is something that he also was learning as we went along.
You said this morning at the press conference that you weren't betrayed by India, but you felt disappointed. Let me ask you a blunt question. Did India make promises and make commitments to secure the games, which it has been unable to live up to and fulfill?
No, they secured a game based on the fact that people were encouraged that India, the largest Commonwealth country, wanted to host the games. India had the resources. There was no shortage of commitment from the government and the various agencies in doing this. Where I think we fell short is that India perhaps did not understand the complexity of hosting a multi-sports games of this magnitude. And although they hosted the Asian Games many, many years ago, the world we live in is totally different. The standards we're working to are a lot different, and certainly we needed to convince them of these standards that we have to work to, which are international standards now.
You said India has great lessons to learn. What sort of lessons do you think need to be learned?
I think, first of all, we have to understand that the games will be held, and I think they will be successful. We can only judge that afterwards. But I think India has to learn that when you're hosting an international event, you are hosting it not as an Indian event, but it has to be based on what the international requirements are.
Now, it's well known that when you came to India this time, you wanted a meeting with the Prime Minister. You ended up meeting the Cabinet Secretary. The Prime Minister's office has let it be known that he declined to meet you. Were you a bit upset by that?
Well, I think it would have been nice for the Prime Minister to hear firsthand from me, but at the same time I must respect the Prime Minister of the country and how he allocates his time, and he has asked the Cabinet Secretary, and certainly the action we have gotten from the Cabinet Secretary is extremely satisfactory.
A quick couple of questions about the Commonwealth Games Federation itself. John Coates, the chairman of the Australian Olympic Committee, has said that India shouldn't have been awarded the Games in the first place after the experience you've been through. And after your feelings that even today, with just 8 days to go, things are nowhere near completely in readiness. Do you think John Coates is right?
No. Everybody's entitled to their opinion, and if you read what he said in hindsight. But he also was a little contradictory, I thought, because later on in his statement, he says we need to move away from the traditional countries of England, Australia, Scotland, and so on. No, you can't have that. And we can't have a situation where the largest country of the Commonwealth, by far, in terms of population and land size, is not given an opportunity of hosting the Games. The Federation has to accept that we have taken on this responsibility with certain challenges. I think we have faced those challenges, and I think we're going to correct all those errors and shortcomings by the time the Games start on October the 3rd.
One of the other things that John Coates said was that the Commonwealth Games Federation has not done an effective job monitoring the progress of work in Delhi, and he added that you didn't have the resources to do the job you're supposed to do. Now that, in a sense, is criticism of you and Mike Hooper.
Well, he did add we don't have the resources. He's probably comparing it with the International Olympic Committee and the IOC. They have mega dollars at their disposal. We do not have that. But I don't think he has made those comments with proper information, because we did monitor it very, very carefully. We had a coordination commission visiting every 6 months. We had my own personal visits. We had meetings here, general assemblies, meetings of our chef de missions and all of that throughout the same sort of management routine and government structures as applied in the IOC. So that's not different.
This morning at your press conference, you did say that we all share the blame.
Yeah.
And that's been interpreted to mean that I, Mike Fennell, and also Mike Hooper, my CEO, are partly responsible for what's gone wrong.
Well, we all must share the blame. You can't shed responsibility and shed everything to everybody else. We from the Federation, we enter into a contract with an organising committee, and we expect that organising committee to deliver with their partners. But we also have to be a part of the whole thing. We're doing this as a team.
My last question. Indian authorities have repeatedly said that this will be the best ever Commonwealth Games. Today, at the press conference, Mr. Kalmadi slightly lowered it and said that it will be at least as good as Melbourne. What's your assessment? And be honest with me. What sort of a Games will it be?
I think that we will have a challenge to ensure that the Games are completed in good style. They will be unique. I think we're going to have a spectacular opening ceremony. We have certain elements of the Games that are better than any that I've seen. You have some excellent venues. Despite the problems in the village, the international zone is far superior to many other international zones I've seen. The food is excellent, the dining facilities is good, and the whole ambience of the sort of public areas there is very good. And I think that the Games have a good chance of being excellent, and we can only judge this on the 15th of October.
But you don't sound as if you're endorsing the sentiment that this will be the best ever.
No, I'd never say that at these Games, and I never use the term best ever, because it's difficult to compare one Games with another 4 years afterwards when the environment and the circumstances are different.
How close to worst ever?
No, I don't even know which one we would call worst ever. We're living in a different century, we're living in a different era.
All right, Mr. Fennell. A pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.